Roller coasters have been around for over a century, and in that time, they have been innovating immensely, with new coasters growing taller, faster, longer, and much more thrilling overall. However, one of the various ways roller coasters have improved over the years is via the inclusion of inversions, including coasters which hold the record for having more than any other in operation, and today, we will be looking at the history of this record and every coaster which broke it, including the one that currently holds the record to this very day. Just so you know, I'll also mention similar coasters which I feel are still important and relevant, so with that out of the way, let's get right into the history of the roller coaster inversion record. The first record for the most inversions is on the very first coaster to ever have inversions, obviously, and that was the Foot Flat Raceway. This ride had a simple loop and pulled up to 12 Gs according to some reports. The reason the forces had to be so intense was because the ride did not have any upstop wheels, meaning if the G-forces were too light, the car would fall right out of the loop. And it made this ride very uncomfortable, with infamous reports of whiplash and injuries on the ride itself. All of these issues caused the ride to go defunct soon after it opened. Another similar ride was built in 1901, which was similar, but this had a dueling layout and only operated for 1 year, likely for similar reasons. There was also another similar ride known as Looping Bahn, which opened in the late 1940s at Wiener Prater, but only operated until sometime in the 1950s, with one vertical loop and a splashdown element. The first coaster to invert more than once, and the first steel coaster to invert, did not come until more than 70 years after, when the innovative aerodynamics sold to Knott's Berry Farm, where the park then proceeded to open it for the 1975 season. Although two other coasters, which were replicas of this ride, opened that year, this was the very first coaster ever to open, and the initial prototype model manufactured of their new Corkscrew coaster. This ride was quite simple, with a layout involving a drop, turnaround, two corkscrew loops, and another turnaround into the brake run. This ride was also cloned at various parks around the world and went on to be a successful and profitable cloned model for the company. Though this coaster was removed in the late 1980s, it was relocated to Silverwood in Idaho, where you can still ride it today. The next coaster to break the record was also known as Corkscrew, and it opened 1 year later at Cedar Point. It was the first coaster to have 3 inversion, and the first aero coaster to feature a vertical loop, and the second ever steel coaster to do so. This ride was very similar to the first Corkscrew, but it had a more outstretched layout featuring the previously mentioned loop and a more straight drop, as well as an airtime hill before the turnaround, followed by the corkscrews, which led you straight into the brakes. Similar versions to this ride were built at other parks, including one 4 years later at Valley Fair with a removed airtime hill but an added helix to the layout. This coaster was also a prelude to Aero's custom looping coaster model, which would go on to do more impressive things than this smaller and earlier looping steel coaster. The next coaster to break the record was the Carolina Cyclone. Opening in 1980, this is arguably one of the first of Aerodynamics' custom looping models, featuring 2 loops and a double corkscrew. This was the first coaster to invert 4 times. The ride is similar to the basic corkscrew model, but with a more unique and custom extended layout. The ride still operates today at Carowinds, though the ride itself is not too special after that, except for the fact that it got a repaint more than once over its lifetime. There was another coaster which opened the following month by the same company, which also had 4 inversions in Missouri, known as the Orient Express, which is the first coaster to feature a batwing element, as well as the third and final one to feature interlocking vertical loops. In 1982, the first ride ever to open with 5 inversions was built near Buffalo, New York in Darien Lake Amusement Park. This ride had a loop, a batwing, and a double corkscrew. This ride was not painted until after it was constructed, with it having a rustic metal color during construction. The ride initially had a light mint or bluish colored track, but was eventually painted over to the same black color of the supports. My friend Carter, also known as Millennium Forceman, did a review for this ride, which will be in the description and in the iCard above. Other than that, there isn't much else that's special. It kind of featured the same copy and paste elements that were on a lot of other aero loopers of the time. There are not really any super similar coasters that are worth mentioning, so I'll be moving on to the next record breaker. That next record breaker, by the way, was Vortex. After the failure of a new prototype coaster known as the Bat, which closed only 2 years after operation, Aero built a replacement coaster for the park in 1987 known as Vortex. This ride was the tallest coaster in the world at the time and broke the inversion record after a large 5-year gap with the record being retained. Vortex was the first coaster to achieve 6 inversions. The order of the inversions on the ride was similar to Viper, with the only differences being that the corkscrews were actually before the Batwing and the fact that there were 2 vertical loops instead of 1, allowing this ride to break the record. This ride sadly closed in 2019 with much outcry from coaster fans from across the world, since this was a well-regarded ride that was considered a classic by both Kings Island and Aerodynamics fans. There will also be a review for this in the iCard or description, so go check that out as well. But surprisingly, just 1 year later, the record was broken again with Shockwave at Six Flags Great America. This coaster was the very first coaster to hit the magic 7 inversion milestone. Many coasters that operate today have this exact amount of inversions, and seems to be an agreed upon standard for high thrill coasters in places like North America, though some are starting to defy that standard. This ride was one of 3 mega loopers built for the Six Flags chain from 1988 to 1990, and featured 3 vertical loops in a row and a batwing and 2 corkscrews. The layout of this is also similar to Viper at Magic Mountain and Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Great Adventure. This was the only one out of the 3 to have blue track, and sadly the first one to go defunct after the 2002 season when it was torn down for Superman Ultimate Flight, a B&M flying coaster, to replace it. Though only one of the 3 originals still stand, that does not take away the contributions these rides had for the industry as a whole. The first coaster with 8 inversions was Dragon Con at PortAventura World in Spain. This is the only B&M coaster on this list, and is the only B&M to ever feature more than 7 inversions, as well as the first entry on this list from Europe. This is also one of the few classic sit-down coasters built by the company, which are highly regarded and acclaimed by coaster enthusiasts around the world. However, this ride seems to not enjoy as much acclaim that some of its siblings have received, and honestly it seems a little underrated, especially with its unique qualities. So if you like rides like Kumba or the Hulk, be sure to book your tickets to Spain and get on this ride. In 2002, Thorpe Park in the UK had been having a rough few years, such as a major fire doing damage to the park as well as a recent change in management. However, Thorpe Park would get lucky and put themselves on the map with help from Intamin with the debut of the 10 inversion coaster model, with the very first installation known as Colossus. This coaster became a well-known and intriguing coaster amongst enthusiasts and the general public, both in the UK and across the world. There would also be several other exact clones of this coaster built around the world in the coming years and even to this day. In fact, there's another clone of this ride opening up next year in the UK at Flamingoland, another notable park in Britain. This ride is also known for having multiple Heartline rolls in a row, creating this strange set of final inversions. The hang time on this element seems cool, and this element also seems very disorienting, which is why it must be very exciting to experience. But before we get into the current record holder, I'd like to go through some honorable mentions of coasters I feel are notable and or hold inversion-related records worthy of respect. Outlaw Run was the first wooden coaster after Son of Beast to invert, as well as the first coaster to invert 3 times, a record which it still holds today, tied with Wildfire, a wooden coaster in Sweden. This ride was one of the first coasters from RMC, a notable and highly rated coaster manufacturer. Olympia Looping holds the inversion record for traveling coasters, with 5 in total, as well as holding the record for most vertical loops on a coaster, with also 5 in total. This ride has been touring Europe since the 1980s and is an iconic coaster that's considered one of the best from legendary coaster builder Anton Schwarzkopf. The Intamin 8 inversion coaster debuted in 1996 with Monte Macaya, a classic ride in Latin America which operated until 2010, where it was left SBNO and was taken down in 2016. It was very similar to the previously mentioned Colossus and paved the way for this record to be broken. There's also other 8 inversion clones across the world, however there's only one left in operation, known as Avalancha in Guatemala. Steel Curtain opened in 2019 at Kennywood Amusement Park in Pennsylvania. This ride was the first coaster in the USA with more than 7 inversions, with 8 or 9 depending on who you ask. Since the banana roll is counted as 2 inversions by the park but only 1 by RCDB, this barrier took a long time to break, which is why it's mentioned here, and hopefully more coasters in the future can break it in the USA, especially with the progress made in Europe and other parts of the world. Now for the current record holder. You know what it is, it's the Smiler. We all knew this was coming, and it's very well known that this ride holds this record. This ride is noted for its heavy theming and visuals, as well as for much less decent reasons. This ride is also one of the 2 debut Gerstauer Infinity coasters, and the only one so far to use OTSR restraints. This ride is a whopping 14 inversions, decimating the previous record of 10. There's a reason why this coaster remains a popular ride to Alton Towers and a beloved ride for UK coaster enthusiasts. And that's the full history of the inversion record so far. I'm so glad you guys are liking my content and watching my stuff and enjoying it. If you like this content and want to see similar content from this channel, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on this video to help me grow this channel. But now that's out of the way, what do you guys think will break the record next? Comment your answers down below, but that's all for today. Peace out.